If you are reading this, they already know. Do not trust the man in white.
She was just a surgeon, logical, rational, grounded in science. But when Dr. Eleanor Rice returned to her grandfather's abandoned house, she never expected to find a letter hidden beneath the floorboards. A letter in her own handwriting, warning her. If you are reading this, they already know. Do not trust the man in white. The ink was fresh. The message felt impossible. Each night, the house whispered her name. Each morning, her memories felt less like her own. Then she found the tapes, surgeries she did not remember, footage of herself on the operating table, and someone else guiding her hands. Someone left the message, someone in white, and something was already inside her mind. You thought you knew your body. You thought you knew your mind. But what if they were never truly yours? This is the story of the doctor who opened the wrong message and awakened a mind that was not her own. Before we begin this mysterious journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Past Portal Channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that twist reality and challenge the mind. To everyone who has liked, shared, subscribed, and left a comment, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We see you, we appreciate you, and you're a big part of why these stories come alive. May you always be surrounded by clarity, protection, and peace wherever your path leads. Now, turn down the lights and listen closely. The truth might just be buried beneath your very feet. The wind scraped against the wooden shutters of the old house as Dr. Eleanor Rice stepped out of her car, her boots pressing into the moss-covered gravel of the driveway. The countryside smelled of damp leaves and silence, far from the sterile hum of the hospital hallways she had known for years. After the accident that claimed her parents' lives, this house was all she had left. Her grandfather's home, untouched for more than a decade, stood before her like a question she was not ready to answer. The paint was peeling, the air was cold, yet something about the place called to her deeper than grief ever could. She entered with slow steps, her fingers trailing over dusty furniture and covered portraits that stared back like ghosts waiting for her return. By nightfall, the house seemed to sigh with every gust of wind. Eleanor lit a small lantern and curled up on the old couch in the living room, planning to rest just one night before calling a real estate agent. Her phone had no signal, and the power line crackled ominously each time the thunder roared outside. A particularly sharp crack of lightning shook the frame of the house. Just as she sat upright, the floor beneath her feet emitted a loud groan. One of the floorboards shifted, revealing a thin crack along the brain. She knelt down, brushing aside the dust and wedging her fingers into the crevice. Something thin and hard resisted. With one firm tug, a loose plank popped free, revealing a hollow beneath. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, was a letter. The name on the front made her blood run cold. It read, "To Dr. L. Rice," a name that matched hers far too precisely. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Though the parchment looked aged, the ink was sharp and crisp, as if it had been written just yesterday. Her heart pounded louder than the storm outside. The handwriting was hers, not similar, not close. It was hers, down to the way she curled her lowercase e and slanted her t. The message inside was brief but jarring. It read, "If you are reading this, they already know. Do not trust the man in white." Eleanor stared at the note, her mind unable to process how something like this could exist. A chill crept up her spine, not from the cold air, but from the awareness that something in this house was waiting for her, watching her, and now it knew she was here. The next morning arrived without sunlight. Gray clouds loomed above the treetops, casting the old house into a dim shadow as Eleanor wandered from room to room, holding the letter like a relic from a dream. She had not slept. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind against the glass had kept her eyes wide and alert. She had placed the letter inside a medical folder, as if filing it would make it easier to rationalize. But nothing about this made sense. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, trying to tell herself it was a prank or some elaborate setup from a stranger. But who would break into a forgotten house just to deliver a message she had seemingly written herself? That night, something shifted in the air. She lay in bed upstairs with her eyes open, listening to the wind, when she heard it, a voice, whispering through the air vents, soft and deliberate. It called her name. Not Ellie like her friends used to, not Dr. Rice as her patient said, but Eleanor, said slowly, like someone savoring the syllables. She froze. The voice was not hers, yet it came with a tone so familiar it made her chest ache. She tiptoed toward the vent in the wall and placed her ear near the metal slats. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, in a low rasp, the voice returned. "He is already inside." Eleanor recoiled, knocking over a bedside lamp, the crash breaking the stillness and making the voice vanish like vapor. Panicked, Eleanor grabbed her coat and flashlight and descended the stairs. She needed to see the crawl space beneath the floor again. This time, she brought gloves and a small crowbar. She widened the hole beneath the plank and shone the light down. The beam hit something smooth and metallic. She reached in and retrieved a small, locked tin box covered in dust and spider webs. The initials LR were etched into the lid. She tried to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. As she leaned closer, her flashlight flickered. For a split second, she saw her reflection in the beams bounce from the polished tin, and her eyes in the reflection blinked twice as fast as her own. She dropped the box in shock. The echo of metal against wood echoed louder than it should have, and from somewhere beneath the house, something whispered again. This time, not in her voice at all. Eleanor awoke, slumped over the dining table, her neck stiff and her breath ragged. The morning light barely reached through the windows, filtered by the dense mist that now coated the forest beyond the house. She could not recall falling asleep. The letter lay beside her, crumpled at the corners, and the tin box sat on the table, still locked. Determined to understand what was happening, she returned to her grandfather's old study, a room she had avoided until now. The air inside was stale with forgotten knowledge, the walls lined with journals, patient charts, and research notes yellowed by time. But none of it was mundane. These were not records of healing. They were records of experiments. Names of test subjects crossed out violently in red, paired with diagrams of the human brain, each one altered, rewired, or split in ways that defied her training as a neurosurgeon. Behind the tall bookshelf, Eleanor noticed scratch marks on the wooden floor, forming a perfect arc. With effort, she pushed the heavy shelf aside, revealing a narrow door with a rusted handle. The door groaned as she opened it, revealing stairs descending into a dark, hidden basement. The smell hit her first, metallic and thick. She held her sleeve to her face as she descended, the flashlight beam trembling in her grip. At the bottom, she found an examination chair bolted to the center of the room, restraints dark with dried blood still fastened tight. Surgical trays sat nearby, covered in dust and something worse. Along the back wall, dozens of videotapes lined a crooked shelf. Her name was written on several. Her breath caught as she pulled one from the stack. It was dated 5 years ago, a time she had been in medical school halfway across the country. Her hands refused to be still as she placed the tape into the ancient player mounted beside the shelf. The footage sprang to life with a soft static. A dimly lit version of the basement filled the screen. Then she saw herself, wearing surgical gloves, operating under the harsh glow of a single light. Her movements were precise, practiced. She did not recognize the man strapped to the table. His head was shaved.
Her voice echoed from the speakers, clinical and detached, listing instruments and procedures in a tone she used daily in the hospital. But she had never performed surgery in this house, never. She watched, frozen in horror, as the camera panned closer. In the reflection of the surgical tray, her eyes on the screen looked directly into the lens and smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not belong to someone saving a life. It belonged to someone who had forgotten what it meant to be human.
The silence in the basement grew heavier as the tape ended with a flicker. Eleanor sat motionless, her pulse roaring in her ears. She played the next video, her fingers trembling with dread. This one began with close-up shots of surgical instruments being arranged with meticulous care. Then the camera zoomed out to reveal the same operating chair, only this time the patient's face was covered. Eleanor, again in her surgical gown, moved around the table with mechanical precision. The way she adjusted the light, how she picked up the scalpel, it all felt rehearsed. But nothing could prepare her for the moment when the camera angle changed and showed the face beneath the cloth. Her breath hitched. The face on the table was hers. She recoiled from the screen, stumbling over a tray and falling against the concrete wall. Her skin prickled with cold sweat as the video played on. From the edge of the frame, another figure entered the room. A tall man dressed in a white lab coat, his face obscured by shadows and the angle of the camera. Yet one detail struck her like a blade to the gut. On his wrist was a vintage watch, her grandfather's watch. The man leaned over the operating table, whispering something into her ear, her own ear, before the image cut to black. The tape ended abruptly, but the silence it left behind screamed louder than any noise. Eleanor curled into herself, gasping for air, trying to separate what she had seen from what she knew. The truth was unraveling, and she was not sure which part of her mind had started the tearing. As she scrambled back upstairs, the mirrors in the hallway distorted her reflection. Her face looked longer, her expression unfamiliar, her posture slightly off. In the bathroom, she splashed cold water on her cheeks, gripping the sink until her knuckles turned white. But her eyes refused to stop twitching. That night, she slept on the couch with the lights on and the television tuned to static, hoping white noise would drown out whatever memories were trying to claw their way to the surface. Yet before dawn, she awoke standing in the study, holding a scalpel in her hand and humming a lullaby she did not remember learning. The tin box now sat open on the desk, its lock broken, revealing several old keys and a folded note that simply read, "He is not done with you yet." Eleanor stared at the open tin box, her heartbeat pounding in her throat. The note inside felt warm to the touch, as if it had only just been placed there. She unfolded it slowly, revealing a diagram of the human brain, annotated with initials that matched her own, alongside surgical instructions far beyond any known procedure. Scribbled at the bottom was a signature, Lawrence Reese, her grandfather. Her knees weakened as she lowered herself into the old leather chair, the walls of the study closing in like a mouth preparing to swallow her whole. The pieces were rearranging in her mind, and she could no longer trust which memories were real and which ones had been placed there. The house, the whispers, the tapes, none of it could be coincidence. She had not just inherited the property, she had inherited everything her grandfather had become. Desperate for clarity, she drove to the city to meet an old colleague from medical school, now a neurologist known for his work on cognitive mapping. She brought her latest brain scan, one she had taken weeks before for a routine study. He looked at the image, then at her, and his expression darkened. "You have an implant," he whispered. "Not medical, not legal, something synthetic embedded near your hippocampus. It is interfering with your memory and your sleep regulation. Someone's been altering your cognitive identity." Before she could respond, he stood up, packed his bag, and left the room without another word. Eleanor sat frozen, holding the scan, her mind racing. This was not just psychological decay. This was deliberate, engineered, implanted.
Back at the house, she tore through the crawlspace again, searching deeper than before. Her hand scraped wood and stone until she found another envelope, this one brittle with age, sealed with wax, and addressed not to her, but to Dr. Lawrence Reese. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside were pages of his final notes, revealing years of memory transfer experiments, brain-to-brain mapping, and the terrifying success of his final trial. The last line read, "She is my last chance. If I fail, I vanish. If I succeed, I continue. One of us must survive." Her reflection in the broken hallway mirror flickered again, the eyes not blinking, the mouth curling into a smile before she could react. Eleanor backed away slowly, her breath shallow, as the truth landed hard in her bones. There was never a message for her. She was the message, and someone else was already reading it from within.
The walls no longer felt like walls. They pulsed, they breathed. Eleanor paced the living room, her hands clutching the folded note as if it were a lifeline. But the paper did not promise salvation. It confirmed possession. The memories she thought were hers, her childhood, her studies, her first surgery, flashed in fragments, stitched together like poorly edited film. Some moments came with smells and sounds that made sense. Others came with voices she had never heard in her life. Her grandfather had not just saved his research in that house. He had saved himself through her. She understood now that the note under the floor had not been a warning from her to herself, but a buried trigger from Lawrence, a calculated failsafe meant to unlock a submerged layer of his identity inside her mind. She returned to the basement one final time, armed with her recorder and a flashlight. She needed to document everything, if not for the world, then for whatever part of herself still remained. As she entered the cold chamber, she noticed new writing etched into the cement wall. It was fresh. It spelled out her full name in cursive, followed by a single phrase, "Let me finish what I started." Her flashlight sputtered, casting flickering shadows across the floor. Then she saw him, her grandfather, or rather the image of him, standing behind the chair, smiling. But when she blinked, it was gone. She turned and looked into the steel tray beside the chair. Her reflection stared back, but the eyes that met hers were not afraid. They were calm, calculating, smiling slightly with a recognition she could not share. She reached up to touch her own cheek and found herself whispering words she could not understand. Later, the camera she had placed in the study continued to record. Eleanor sat perfectly upright at the desk, writing with a hand that moved far too smoothly. Her tone when she spoke aloud was slower, deeper. "I had to do it," she said into the lens. She was breaking apart. I only took what she could no longer carry. She blinked, and for a moment something flickered across her face, an expression too old for her skin. Behind her, the mirror caught the outline of two figures where only one should have stood. The room fell silent again, save for the soft scratch of pen against paper. The file she was writing bore a new title, Dr. Eleanor Rise, Subject 1, Reconciliation Successful. She did not look up again, even as the lights dimmed and the screen turned black. In quiet towns across Europe, where ancient stone houses guard centuries of secrets, it is easy to believe the past is buried for good. But what if memory is not something we own, but something that can be edited, erased, or even borrowed? In a world filled with smart technology, voice assistants, and biometric scans, how often do we ask how much of what we think, feel, and remember truly belongs to us? Like the cobbled streets of Prague or the foggy alleys of Edinburgh, stories often twist beneath the surface. Just as Eleanora's mind became a vessel for something far older, so too might we carry pieces of history, trauma, or inherited choices without even knowing it. The question is not whether we are alone, but whether we are the only ones steering the path we walk each day.
If this story stirred your thoughts or made your skin crawl even just a little, help us share it with others. Tap like, subscribe to Past Portal channel, and share this video with those who enjoy stories where reality bends and truth hides in plain sight.